All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Today's daf. Well, first, let's begin by thanking all of our sponsors. Thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Nissan. Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Shirmer drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah and Sarah bas Avrohom, and to thank Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all the Shurim and drushos this month in memory of Avraham's mother, Sarah Bryna bas Yehoshua Heschel. We hope that in the merits of our TALMUD TORAH, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in a chamra. We'll say with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chav Beis. We have a lot to do today. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Chav Aleph Amud Beis 21b, and we left off with Amar Rabbi Yochanan, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, to about 11 lines down from the top. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said as follows: Ein divrei Torah miskayim el b'misha meisim atzmo kimo she'eno. Divrei Torah are only sustained within someone who makes himself like nothing. Meaning that Torah ultimately, again, is only sustained within someone who possesses the trait of humility. Shne'emar v'achachma me'ayin timtza. A little bit of a play on words. Literally, where is chachma found? From ayin, from someone who makes himself like a nothing. I will say, of course, humility, doesn't mean thinking of yourself as a nothing. Thinking of yourself as a nothing is a lack of self-worth. But rather, again, in this particular context, ayin means the concept of humility. Humility is the ingredient that allows one to retain their Torah. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer Rotze Isha. So my kamar, supposed to remember again, the Mishnah said that Rabbi Yehoshua said that Rabbi Yeshua's statement. So my kamar, what are we saying? Hachi kamar Rotze Isha bekav v'tiflus imo mitisha kabin uprishus. Ultimately, again, what did we say? We said that halacha l'maisa is incredible. That a woman, literally again, would rather have a kav. A kav is a lower measure. Tiflus means intimacy. Then go ahead and have tisha, more gashmius, tisha uprishus, and a lack of intimacy. Meaning that the Mishnah is trying to highlight the idea that for a woman, having a relationship with her husband, I will say again, intimacy doesn't necessarily just have to mean a sexual relationship. Intimacy means a sense of physical closeness. So at the end of the day, a woman would rather go ahead and have physical closeness and less material wealth in her home or in her marriage than more material wealth and a lack of physical closeness. Incredible Gemara. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Wa Omer Chasid Sotah." So let's remember again, the Mishnah then began to discuss the case of a chosid shota, of a foolish, a pious fool. Thank you, a pious fool. So the Gemara says, "Hechi dami chosid shota." What's the case of a chosid shota? Kigon dekatava isisa benara va'amar lav arach ara listakule va'atzula. We'll say, what's a good case of a chosid shota, of a foolish, of a pious fool? A man who's walking by, he sees a woman drowning in a river. And he says, you know what, it's not appropriate to look at women. Right? It's not appropriate to look at women. It's not appropriate to touch a woman. And therefore, again, he kind of walks by. Again, is it not appropriate to look at women in a lustful fashion? Of course. Is it not appropriate to touch women who are not related to you, not your wife? Of course. But Lamaisa, again, Hatzalas Nefashos is Hatzalas Nefashos. So that's a pious fool. So also you see from here that the real definition of a pious fool is someone who kind of contorts the very principles upon which the Torah is built and uses them in a way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never want them used. An incredible idea. So the Gemara says, Heichi dami rasha arum. What's the case of a cunning rasha? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zehamatim dvarav l'dayan kodem sheba baldin chavero. This refers, we'll say, to a litigant who advances his information to the judge prior to his fellow litigant showing up. So I will say this is interesting. In other words, so what is this individual doing? He's prejudicing the judge before the case even starts. Right? He's creating a prejudice. And I will say, so again, the reason the Gemara calls him a rasha arum, cunning, is because he's doing something like very nuanced, right? Is he committing an avera? Is he committing an overt avera? Well, the truth is, it's an avera for the judge to listen to one side before the other side is present. But Lamaisa, this is a very cunning behavior, sought to go ahead, meant to tip the scales in his balance. Rabbi Avrohom Omer Zah no sing dinar la'ani lahashtum lo masayim. This is incredible. What's a rasha arum? What's a cunning rasha? It's someone who goes ahead and gives a dinar. Dinar is a small amount of money to an ani in order to allow him to reach the 200 zuz threshold. The Rabbi will say, what's unique about the 200 zuz threshold? He says, Disnan, mishiyesh lo masayim zuz. Someone who possesses 200 zuz, lo yitol leket shechacha upea umaiser ani. This is interesting. If you have more than 200 zuz or more in your bank account, you are disqualified, essentially, from taking tithes for the poor. Right? In other words, you've met the minimum income level, which disqualifies you from taking money usually set aside for the poor. And I watch this. I feel elef nostin lo ke'achon harei yitol. That I will say again. At that point, if a person receives a gift of a certain amount of money, even though that gift would go ahead and automatically take him over the threshold, he'd be permitted to go ahead and take it. So I will say. So the idea over here is what's a rasha arum? What's a cunning rasha? Someone goes over to the ani and it gives him just enough to put him over the threshold. So it's not a meaningful gift. But it's meaningful enough that he can no longer take from any other tithe set aside for the poor. So in other words, that's called the rasha arum because look, either help or don't help. Right? If you're going to help, then help with something meaningful. If you're not going to help, then leave him alone and at least allow him to collect from the tithes from which he's technically entitled to. Rabbi Yochanan Zamasi Eitzel Limkar Benechasim Mu'atin. Rabbi say this is someone who gives advice to sons to sell a small amount of assets. I'll say very quickly outside. Remember, let's say a father dies, he leaves behind a small. Now, generally, if father dies, so sons inherit, daughters are supported from the estate. That's the way it works. Let's say halacha l'maisa, father only left behind a very small estate. In that case, what we do is daughters are supported by the estate, and the sons have to support themselves. Now, technically speaking, if the sons go ahead and sell off the estate, even though it's wrong, what the sale stands. The Gemara says, what's a rasha arum? A rasha arum is someone who encourages the sons to go ahead and sell off the estate when there's only the small estate. Technically, it's legal, but now what he's done is he's deprived the daughters of any source of support. So I will say, you begin to see the common denominator over here. He goes on and he says, Abai says another example, so what's an rasha arum? It's someone who gives advice to sell off property, like Rabbi Shmuel Silber. What's Rabbi Shmuel Silber? Let's listen to this. Interesting gift. Let's say Ruvain is on his deathbed, or I should say, we'll call him Goses is on his deathbed, and he says as follows. He says, Ruvain, when I die, my property goes to you, and after you, I want whatever remainder to go to Shimon. Right? So you can make a successive gift, right? It goes to you and then to Shimon. So I will say, now what's the halacha? So let's say Reuben decides, you know what? I'm selling the property. What's the halacha? Hasheni motzi miyad al kuchos divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that Shimon could come along and extract the property from the purchasers because Reuven didn't really have a right to sell, right? Remember again, Reuven has it for Reuven's lifetime and then it passes to Shimon. If Reuven sells it to someone, technically speaking, Reuven didn't have that right. So therefore, again, Rebbe says that Allah Alamaisa, Shimon could come and extract the property from the purchasers. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, Ein l'sheni ela masha shi'arishon. Rabbi Shmuel says, it's not really true. All Shimon really has is whatever Reuven left over. And in this case, what's left over after Reuven? What's left over? Nothing, because Reuven sold it. So we'll say, so therefore Reuven acted inappropriately, but lamaisa, it works. So the Gemara goes right to the Gemara says, Rav Yosef Bar Chama Amar Rav Sheshes Zamachriya Achirim Barachosov. What's a rasha arum? What's a cunning rasha? It's someone who goes in and tries to get people to follow him. If you look at Rashi says, or last Rashi on the daf, Hamachriya Achirim Barachosov Re'u Va'asu Kamoni. Right? A person says, look at me and follow my ways. Uluchu b'drachai. V'lo niskavin ze ela laharos atzmo kichased be'enei habrios ve'ein tocho kibaro. So Rabbi say, what is this person trying to accomplish? He's trying to get people to follow him so that he looks pious. And Rabbi say, when you look pious, the good thing is that what? People don't necessarily examine your deeds as closely. So therefore, again, kind of the veneer of piety allows him to go ahead and do other things underneath the radar. What's a Rasha Arum? So we'll say Rasha Arum ultimately again is someone who is machmir for other people, but mekel for himself. I will say, by the way, this doesn't just have to be in halacha, right? This is in general sometimes one of the hardest things that we do, even without even realizing it, is we hold other people to such a high standard, and yet for ourselves, we give ourselves a pass on everything. Right? I make a mistake, okay, look, people make mistakes. Someone else makes a mistake, unforgivable. Shabbos say that's called bimachmir la'achirim u'mekel la'atzma. Mekel la'atzma mach la'achirim. It's one of the most common traps that we fall into in interpersonal relationships. To me, I give myself a pass on everything. To others, every transgression is simply unforgivable. That's called the Rasha Arum. Ula Amar Ula says, Zeh Tapav Chav Beis Shekara V'Shana V'Loshim Shamim Chama. I'll say, what? This is actually fascinating. What is a Rasha Arum? A cunning Rasha is someone who learned but never served Talmidei Chachamim. Yeah, I will say, why does that make a person a Rasha Arum? Take a look at Tap Rashi Chav Beis Mendav 22a. Lilmod Svaras HaGimara B'Tamei HaMishnah Mahim Rasha B'May Rasha She'in TORAH Al Burya. Vein lilmod himenu sheyet hamim yeshachiluk beiser veheter b'dinei mamanis lezakos ulechayev b'taros atamir letarki the amar v'kama duchti. My time our hachas supposed to listen to this. We're going to see the concept of shimush tamidei chachamim. We're actually going to speak about this for a little bit of time now. In this context, shimush tamidei chachamim means, I will say, there's information. Remember, we live in a very different time where you could access any and all information without a teacher. Right? In other words, we can access everything, which is an incredible source in the times we live in. So I want to say, from the Gemara's perspective, there are certain things you can learn on your own. Right? What can you learn on your own? You can learn Tanakh on your own. You can learn Mishnah on your own. The problem is, that when you learn a Mishnah, you do not emerge with a full understanding of the topic. Right? You often don't understand the nuances. You don't understand the svaras. So I will say, that's why a person has to be Meshamish Talmidei Chachamim. Shimush Talmidei Chachamim in this particular line means you have a Rebbe, and that Rebbe teaches you the ins and outs of the Mishnayos, the distinctions in halacha. So now you have a Mishnah, and you know how to apply it to real life. Masha'enkein, if you don't have a Rabbi, right, you're not Meshamish Talmidei Chachamim, therefore you don't have svara, you don't have the logic, you don't have the nuanced understanding, ultimately again of the Mishnah. That can lead to all type of disastrous results. So the Gemara calls that a Rasha Arum. So I will say, what I want to highlight to you is something very interesting. So now that's the end of that sugya. So let's remember again, the Mishnah was trying to highlight the negativity of the Rasha Arum. What's unique? We now saw a whole bunch of definitions of Rasha Arum. So I'll say, what's the definition of a Rasha Arum? A Rasha Arum is not necessarily someone who is living on the wrong side of the law, right? He's just a person who's not doing the right thing. And that's what makes him, Rasha is that he's not doing the right thing. What makes him Arum, cunning, is that again, if you kind of try to say, is he doing something usser? Not necessarily. In other words, you'd be hard-pressed to identify the isser that he's committing in all of these examples, but it's wrong. So I will say, sometimes in life, you could be in the legal right, but you're still wrong. Right? We try to, as parents, we try to teach our children this concept all the time, because children as concrete thinkers, right, are either like, well, is it right or is it wrong? And as adults who are hopefully a bit more sophisticated and nuanced, we understand something could be right in that it's not wrong, right? Something could be legal, but it's wrong. It's inappropriate. It's not what should be done. And I will say that's why it's interesting, because like the build-up, right? What's the last definition of Rasham Arum? I would say is Zeshekara Vishna Lo Shimish Tamid Chamim. I would say, how do you pick up those nuances in life, right? Because a lot of this is nuanced. How do you pick up? I would say, I want to point out in every example of the Rasha Arum. I would say, is there an opinion for the Rasha to hang his hat on in every single one of these cases? The answer is yes. It's interesting, but it's not right. I will say that's where the Shimush Talmidei Chachamim comes along, right? That's where attaching oneself to a Rebbe, attaching oneself to a moral guide, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be a Rebbe in the classical sense, but attaching myself to someone who serves as a moral compass. Because without the moral compass in life, you could be in the legal right, but you're absolutely wrong with how you're living. And that's the Rasha Arum. Someone who maybe is in the legal right, but the moral compass is totally off. What you're doing and how you're doing it is just simply not correct. Incredible Gemara. So we'll say now we're going to use that last phrase as Shimush Talmidei Chachamim as a spring word. So we'll say just want to point out again, this phrase Shimush Talmidei Chachamim is going to mean different things. Right now, in the way we just used it, it refers to someone who just learns Mishnah, but never gets a Rebbe to learn the ins and outs, the nuances of halacha. Something like that is just going to get you into all kinds of Judaic trouble. So Itmar, here we go. Kara v'shana loshim shana lechamim. If a person learned, well, say Kara means learn Tanakh, right? Shana means learn Mishnah, but didn't have a Rebbe, right? We'll say so didn't learn Gemara, didn't learn Svara, didn't learn the nuances. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Hareza Ama Aretz. Rabbi Eliezer says that person is an Ama Aretz. Right? Rabbi Eliezer, what does it mean is an Ama Aretz? Rashi says over here, Shechashud ala Maisrus v'ala Taros. Remember again, Rabbi Eliezer, being called an Ama Aretz, right? Today, you call someone an Ama Aretz. What's the ramification of calling someone an Ama Aretz? Chances are, if you call a person an Ama Aretz, he's going to say, yeah, you're right. Good point. Right, solid point. Right, because again, the truth is, a lot of times I'm an Amara. It's fine. So I say, but lamaisa in halacha that has a ramification. Amaretz, for example, would be someone who is not careful with trumas and maestros. Not careful with trumas and maestros. So we'll say this. So this actually again would have a halachic designation as well. So the Gemara says, so therefore he would not be trusted. Ultimately, again, with Trumas and Maestros. So the Gemara says, Amar Harei Bur. Such a person is a Bur. Rashi says, even Garua me Amaretz. Even less than an Amaretz. Okay? Rabbi Yana Amar Harei Kusi. Such a person is treated like a Kusi. Rabbi saying, understand what that means. Remember again, these are not simply derogatory terms. These are halachic terms. Rashi says, for example, you can't eat the bread or the wine of a kusi. Now, I will say, what are we concerned about over here? What we're concerned about over here is that since this person never learned by Talmidei Chachamim, essentially since this person never had a Rebbe, therefore again never learned Gemara, never learned the ins and outs of halacha, we have to be concerned that such a person does not know what they're doing. So therefore, again, this is not a derogatory term. This is just a practical term. You don't know what you're doing Judaically, and therefore one has to be careful with how they interact. You have to be careful about the food of this person. You have to be careful about the trumas and maestros and taras of this person. Not as a derogatory term, but simply as a metzias, as a de facto term. So the Gemara goes back to the Gemara, says this one's a bit more derogatory. Amar v'achar bar Yaakov, Amar hareze mogush. Rabbi will say this guy is a mogush. Rabbi will say, what's a mogush? So Rashi says over here, mechashev, ha'oches es ha'inayim, v'gonim v'salabavos, v'av zekein. So Rabbi will say, this is an individual, ultimately, again, who's a sorcerer. Rabbi will say, now what's the chap of the sorcerer? So the whole chap of the sorcerer is, it was a lot of smoke and mirrors. It was illusions. So to the person who learns, but is never mishamesh talmidei chachamim, such a person gives the appearance of knowing what they're doing, but in fact, they do not. In fact, they do not. I think this last interpretation, that the person who is not Meshamish Talmidei Chachamim ultimately, again, is like a magush. So ultimately, again, I will say, that seems to be the most mistaber. Why? Da'amri inshi, ratin magusha v'lo yada my amar. I'll say, sometimes you have a sorcerer, and he recites his incantations or his spells, and he has no idea what it is that he's saying. In other words, he knows how to get results, but he has no idea what it is that he's saying. Tani Tana v'lo yada my amar. so too sometimes, again, a person says statements in halacha, right? A person says mishnayos, and he has absolutely no idea what it is that he's saying. So we'll say, so just to understand, like, practically, what this means for us is the need to learn halacha. That's really what this translates into, is the need to learn halacha. Whereas, what's the whole chap of being mishamesh talmidei chachamim? On your own, you can learn Tanakh. On your own, you can learn Mishnah. So practically, when the Gemara emphasizes the importance of being mishamesh talmidei chachamim, what that's saying is you need to know how to practicalize your learning. If you don't know how to take what you learn and translate it into everyday living, then there's this chasm, right? Suddenly, again, there's this incredible canyon in between me and the actualization of my Yiddishkeit. So that's why today, again, I will say this expresses itself. Like I said, we can access the knowledge. You can access the knowledge without anyone, right? But lamaisa, the need to learn halacha, because halacha is how we take theoretical learning and make it practical. And if a person doesn't take the time to learn halacha, there is this whole body of Yiddishkeit that is going ahead and missing. Which is funny we should bring this up, because the new Zman for Smichas Chaver begins in Meretz Hashem a week from this coming Monday night. And I will say, it's an hour a week. It's absoluteness. First of all, you can ask the Chevra who was learning it. We're just finishing Hilchos Nida now, which was an incredible Zman. Guys are taking the Bechina Meretz Hashem this week up through Monday, and then the following Monday, which I think is May 1st. The new Zman begins. We're doing the halachos of Sotah, the halachos of brachos, the halachos of Atov v'Hametiv. It's an incredible Zman, a lighter Zman than Hilchos Nida. And again, that's the way you learn halacha. That, again, you can learn halacha on your own. That's not it's the way. You can learn halacha on your own, but like most things we choose to do on our own, we generally don't end up doing them. When you're part of a systematic program where you learn, there's a shir, there's a bechina, changes your life. Mondays, 8 o'clock, good, back to Daf Yomi. Says the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, Ezu Ama Aretz. Rabbi will say, what is an Ama Aretz? So what's interesting? So ultimately, what's an Ama Aretz? An Ama Aretz is anyone who doesn't recite Kriyas Shema in the morning and in the evening with brachas. Okay, so Rabbi will say, so again, interestingly enough, why does this make a person Amar? So Rashi understands it over here. So Rabbi will say, so ultimately again, because if you're not saying Shema by Shachris and by Ma'ariv, that really means you know nothing. Right? In other words, Kriyas Shema is the most basic component of one's Yiddishkeit, right? The affirmation of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I'm not doing that in the morning and in the evening, that's an Ama Aretz. That's an Ama Aretz. I will say, by the way, also like on a hashkafic level, if a Jew is not beginning his day with an affirmation of the oneness of God, and so to speak, ending his day with the affirmation of the oneness of God, there's something fundamentally lacking in my Yiddishkeit. Say, what's an Ama Aretz? Someone who doesn't put on tefillin every day. Incredible. Again, I'll just point out the distinction over here between Shema and Tefillin is, remember again, both of them are looked at as covenantal signs with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Shema is the verbal covenant, the affirmation of the oneness of God. So Tefillin is the physical covenantal sign. So what the Gemara is saying over here, if these covenantal signs are not part of my day-to-day life, there is something fundamentally missing. Benazai Omer, Kol she'ein lo tzitzis bebigdo. Benazai says anyone who doesn't have tzitzis on his beged. So we'll say ultimately again, tzitzis representing also the covenantal sign, literally again as part of my body throughout the day. So we'll say that's also the distinction over here, right? Remember again, so Shema twice a day, Tefillin technically the whole day, but remember there are times you're not wearing tefillin either. A person goes into the bathroom and the person was wearing tefillin the whole day. Tzitzis is a covenantal sign that's attached to me the whole day. It's interesting. Rabbi Yonasan Amar Rabbi Yosef Kol sheyesh lo banim ve'eino megadlin l'Torah. We'll say a profound statement. What's an Ama Aretz? An Ama Aretz, Rabbi says, anyone who does not raise his children to value the study of Torah. So Rabbi said, this is actually fascinating. If you notice a shift over here, up until now we've been defining an Ama Aretz by what you do. Suddenly now this definition says, what's the definition of an Ama Aretz? Anyone who does not pass down the centrality of Torah to the next generation. is called an amaris. Now, I both say, the truth is, they're not far off, it's a progression. We speak of this often. How do you pass down the importance of Torah to the next generation? Right? You model it. You model it. You say Kriyas Shema. You wear tefillin. You wear tzitzis. He'll say, so in other words, and by the way, these are big things, because tzitzis is something your kids see. Tefillin is something your kids see. Kriyas Shema, they may or may not see. So how do you go ahead and ensure that the next generation values Torah? Well, let them see that you value Torah. And I will say, it's interesting, by the way, it's not necessarily seeing you poring over a Gemara, right? Isn't that interesting? Right? It's seeing you living it. So it's seeing that tzitzis out, right? Or hanging out, or knowing that you're wearing it, right? It's seeing that you have that. It's seeing the tefillin marks. It's seeing all of this. That's what ultimately causes my children to value it in their own lives. Incredible. So I'll say, so now we come full circle. Even if a person learned, right, but was not mishamesh tamidei chachamim, then I will say, so again, remember, in this context, shimush tamidei chachamim could mean, like we were saying before, about actually like learning Gemara, like learning halacha, understanding from a Talmud Chacham what to do. Such a person is an amaretz. Kara v'shana v'lo shana harei zebor. But I'll say, if a person learned Tanakh but didn't learn Mishnah, that's a bor. So lo kara v'lo shana. Let's say a person didn't learn at all. Allah v'kasav omer v'zarati es beis Yisrael v'es beis Yehuda zera adam v'zera behema. But I'll say a person has no Torah in their life, they might as well be an animal. What that means is, without Torah in my life, so what am I? Right? Again, what do I have? I will say, it's not saying that people who don't have Torah in their lives are animals, because a lot of people don't know. Right? Well, as a person, you don't know what you don't know. But for those of us who do know, so ultimately, again, living a life without Torah is an animalistic existence. So the Gemara says, the pasuk says, over here, quoting the pasuk from Mishlei, Yiras Hashem b'ni, right? Vamelech, vim shonim al tisarav. So Amrav Yitzchak, elu sheshonim halachas. So I will say, so what does it mean, vim shonim al tisarav? This refers ultimately again to people, sheshonim halachas. Now Rashi says over here, sheshonim halachas means they learn halacha, but they're not mishamesh talmidei chachamim. So we'll say, once again, this is the sugya of the importance, ultimately, again, now I just want to point out something fascinating. Generally, when we have the concept of shimush talmidei chachamim, shimush talmidei chachamim literally means serve talmidei chachamim, which generally means like spend time with talmidei chachamim, because from a talmid chacham, you'll pick up not just Torah, but what? Like how they live, how they conduct themselves, right? Just day to day, and there's value in seeing that. Here, when the Gemara is understanding Shimush Talmidei Chachamim, the Gemara really is understanding it ultimately again in the context of actually learning like halacha and svara and logic, so you can know exactly what to do with your information. So pshitu, that's obviously. So ma'adatema shonim b'chait. So you might have thought maybe shonim al tisarav means don't get involved with people who repeat negative behaviors. Right? After all, Kidur Avrohom, Kevan Sha'avar Adam Avera V'Shanaba. We'll say when a person commits an Avera and then repeats that behavior, Chutralo, it becomes permitted to him. Now we'll say the Gemara elsewhere says, Chutralo, really? That's the way it works in life? If you do an Avera and then you repeat, suddenly it's mutter? I mean, I don't know. That's great news if that's actually true, right? Now let's say, so no, rather the Gemara always says, Na'asis lo keheter. Rather, what it means is once you engage in a negative behavior and you repeat that negative behavior, it becomes like it's mutter to you, which we all know from our own lives. Repeat any behavior. Right? The first time I do something bad, I feel really terrible about it. Right? Do it again, I feel less terrible about it. It usually takes 3 times, right, to feel okay about it. All right. In any event, so I might have thought that's the meaning of the pasuk. Sorry, one second. What was I? I might have thought that's the meaning of the pasuk. V'shonim al tisarav. Literally, again, do not mix with people who commit averos. No, kamash malon, that it's referring to people who are not mishamish talmidei chachamim. Incredible. So Tana hatunoim mivali olam. So we'll say now. This is actually an interesting statement. Tinoim, which means people who learn mishnayos, I'm Mevali Olam, destroy the world. So Mevali Olam, really? People learn Mishnah destroy the world? I don't know. Out of all the people who have a negative impact on the world, I wouldn't think it's the people who learn Mishnayos. Ravina, Shemorin Halacha Mitoch Mishnasan. No, what is it talking about? It's people who paskin halacha based on a Mishnah. Now, I will say, can you imagine that? Now, by the way, I think the contemporary example of this would be people who paskin halacha from Google, right? Again, so that's the modern day equivalent, right? In other words, so it used to be, right, you opened up a Mishnah, although Google is much better than just going ahead and opening up a Mishnah, because you can actually get a lot of information on the internet. I will say, but the idea being that someone who paskins halacha from a Mishnah, ultimately, again, you're missing like a whole body of knowledge. So you could literally destroy the world from going ahead and paskening a halacha from a Mishnah. That supports this. Rabbi Yehoshua, is that true? People are Mishnayos destroy the world. They're learning Torah. Shneimar halichas olam lo ela shemorin halacha mitoch mishnasa. No. Learning Mishnah is absolutely beautiful, and the study of halacha is absolutely something that sustains the world. Paskening halacha from Mishnah is absolutely unequivocally dangerous and potentially disastrous. Isha Prusha. So I'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah then went on for a list of things that are also detrimental. So they spoke about, again, an ascetic woman. So Tan Rabbana, I'll say an incredible story. Tan Rabbana, or not story, but incredible Gemara. Besula Tzailonis, or Tzailonis. Va'amana Shovavin, the katan shlokalulu chadashiv, hare elam avadim. We'll say a very profound Gemara. Literally, again, a besula, an unmarried woman who's always davening, right? Or an amana who is always chatting with the neighbors, right? Or a katan, literally a child who did not finish his months, which sounds like a child in utero who did not finish his months. We'll see what this means. Hare elam avale olam. These are things which destroy the world. I will say now, what's the pshat over here? So Rashi understands over here that sometimes when you see people engaged in excessive behaviors, it's often a front to mask something inappropriate that's going on. So he's saying, like, you see the basula, you see the young woman who's always davening. No one's always davening. So sometimes that could be a front to mask immoral behavior, right? The amana who's always chatting with all of the neighbors, someone who's too social, also sometimes could be a little bit of an indicator of something inappropriate. Now the last one, katan shlokalu chadashav, it's not immediately understandable what it's talking about. Let's see. Ini, is that so? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, labmadnu yiras chet mi besula, v'kibul schar me almana. Yet, again, Rabbi Yochanan said, we learn the concept of yiras chet from a story of a besula and the story of schar from an almana. What's the story? Yiras chet misula. Listen to this incredible story. Rabbi Yochanan shama lahi besula. The nafla abba v'kam. Rabbi say one time Rabbi Yochanan overheard a young woman who was davening, and she said to herself, listen to this, how beautiful this is. Ribono shel olam, barasa gan eden, barasa gehenim. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you created Gan Eden, you created Gehenim. Barasa tzadikim, barasa rishayim. You created tzadikim, you created rishayim. Yiratzam lefanecha shelo yikashlu bi b'nei adam. Kadosh Baruch Hu, it should be your will that no man should sin through me. So apparently she was a very beautiful young lady, and she davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that people shouldn't sin as a result of her. So I'll say, so this is obviously a very pious young woman, right? In other words, it's not her problem. In other words, if a man sins because of her, a man looks at her inappropriately or thinks about her inappropriately, that's not on her, right? That's on him. But she's davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't want to be the reason for someone else's spiritual struggle, which I will say, by the way, is such a fascinating tefillah in general, right? So often what we are focused on, of course, is our own spiritual growth and our own spiritual struggles. But the notion that I don't want to be the source of struggle for someone else is such a high level, right? To think, I don't want to be the stumbling block. I don't want to be the stumbling block for someone else is such a profound piety, like such a selfless piety. So you see over here, so this doesn't exist. So Rabbi Yochanan learned true piety from the story of Besula. What's the story of the Amana? Kibul schar mi Amana. What's his great story? Dahi Amana dahavi beiknishta b'shivuse. Kol yom haba asyo matzla be midrash Rabbi Yochanan. So we'll say there was once a particular Amana, a particular widow, who lived in a neighborhood, but every single day she would travel to come to the base medrash of Rabbi Yochanan. She would come to the base medrash of Rabbi Yochanan for davening. Right? So Amrale BT, So Rabbi Yochanan said, my daughter, is there not a closer shul to you? Right? I mean, the story of Jews throughout history is they always walk by certain shuls to go to others, right? That's like, right? That's a minhag of Asina B'Yadenu. You can't daven at this one. I had to daven at this one, right? So the Maisa again. So the Maisa he says to this woman, he said, I don't understand why are you traveling all this way. Is there not ultimately again a closer shul to you? Amrale Rebbe, v'lo schar psios yeshli. Rebbe, do I not get schar for every single step? So we'll say, so again, so the point the Gemara is making over here is you're making it sound like a pious besula or a pious almana or a social almana that these are necessarily bad things. Okay, yet there are many pious people engaged in these behaviors. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Kika Amar Kigon Yochni Bas Retivi. We're talking about again. I will say. Yochni Bas Retivi. I will say, what's the chap with Yochni Bas Retivi? So I will say, this is actually a pretty wild story. If you take a look at Rashi very quickly, very, very, very quickly. First wide line in Rashi says, Kigon Yochni Bas Retivi, Almana Machashefa Haisa. I will say, she wasn't Almana, right? A widow. She was a Machashefa, right? I will say, what's a Machashefa? Right, not a mother-in-law, right? Again, so again, the term is used, right? Machashefa ultimately is a sorceress. Sorry, right? So I'll say, so ultimately again, so machashefa haisa ucheshamagia eis leidas isha. Let's listen to this. But she was like a legit machashefa. Right? Listen to this. When a woman would give birth, so what happened? Haisod saras rachma machashevos, ula achar shemitztares harbe haisod meres ilech va'abaki shrachamim, v'ulai tishma tfilasi, va'olechas v'so saras kishafeha, va'avlad yotze. So I will say, essentially, so this lady, Yochni Bas Retivi, was a sorceress. And when would she practice her sorcery? When a woman was about to give birth, she would cast a spell upon a woman that essentially would prevent her from giving birth. Obviously, the mother is in agony. So this lady, Yochani Bas Retivi, would say, okay, don't worry, I'm going to daven for her. She would, quote unquote, daven for her, then release her from the spell, she'd give birth. So she developed this reputation as like a real Rebbitzin, right? This is the Rebbitzin. So the Rashi then goes on to say that one time, someone saw exactly what she was doing, and the jig was up. They'll say, so this is an example. In other words, we want to try to give examples that there are people who put on false displays of piety. So the Gemara just says, well, it's very interesting that in general, whenever you see excessive piety, just be wary. Right? That's all. Just look at it. In other words, piety is good. Are there people who are excessively pious? Yes. Who are genuine? Yes. But sometimes it requires us, before we fully follow such an individual, just to go ahead and just to look at it a bit with a critical eye to make sure that it's genuine. I want to say there's this incredible balance in life. You can't be a cynical person, right? Who is cynical and jaded about everyone and everything. At the same time, when you do see certain things that appear to be in excess, it does require me ultimately to look at it with a bit of a critical eye. Not a cynical eye, not a jaded eye, but a bit of a critical eye. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. The Gemara says, "My katan shalkalo chalash." I will say, but what was the example of a katan, of a child, literally again, who did not complete his months? So we'll say, what does that refer to? We'll say it's incredible. I will say this refers to a Talmud Chacham, literally again, who rebels against his Rebbe. I will say, by the way, the wording is so profound. So a Talmud Chacham who rebels against his Rebbe. I will say, what is he like? He's like a child who comes out of the womb before he's ready. Katan shlo kalalo chadashav. Person has a Rebbe. Person has to respect his Rebbe. So if a person thinks, I'm a Talmud Chacham, I'm good enough, I know enough, I could do this on my own. Ultimately, again, he's like a child who's coming out of the womb prematurely. What a profound comparison. Rabbi Abba Amar Zet Talmud Shlo Higia Lahora Umora. This refers to Talmud Chacham who's not really ready to paskin halacha, but still paskins. Dar Rabbi Avo Amar Ravuna Amar Rav Mai Dichsiv Ki Rabim Chalolim Hipila Vatsumim Kol Harogea. So we'll say it's a profound pasuk. We're quoting the pasuk from Mishlei. Literally again, Ki Rabim Chalolim Hipila. He's killed many people. Vatsumim Kol Harogea. But ultimately, again, he's even killed strong people. What does this mean? Ki rabim chalalim hipila. So we'll say, what does it mean? He's killed many people. Zeh Talmud Chacham shlo higia la'ara umora. This refers to a Talmud Chacham who's not really capable of paskening halacha, but still does so. He will say that could be a very destructive thing, which of course we all know this, right? We make sense because halacha, if a person doesn't know, but yet they're giving halachic instruction, giving halachic ruling, lemaisa again, it could cause disastrous results. Rabbi say, but look at the other side of this. But yet, vatsumim kol harogel. Rabbi say, now the way ultimately again we translate this is that ultimately again he's killed strong people as well. Here ultimately again the Gemara is dashing a different way. Atzum kol harogel. What does that refer to? Zet talmid chacham shegia lahora ve'imamora. I'll say very profound. This refers to someone who has the ability to paskin halacha, but doesn't do so. Rashi points out over here, atzumim is from lashon of like closing your eyes. The same way that if you paskin halacha and you're not ready to, it could have disastrous results. So I will say if a person goes ahead and has the ability to provide a service, but doesn't do so, you close your eyes, that also has disastrous results. And I will say, what a profound Gemara. Because right, there's a deeper message to this, even than just pasking halacha. And as I will say, sometimes we get involved in things that we shouldn't get involved in. Right? So the Talmid Chacham who pasking his halacha when he's not capable of doing so, he's putting himself, he's getting into a ring that he shouldn't be in. And I'll say for that there's culpability. There's that culpability. But L'maiseh said there's also equal culpability for being able to do certain things in life and not doing them. And I will say when you have the ability to help somewhere, you have the ability to make a difference somewhere, you have the ability to go and lend your skill set somewhere, and you don't do so, there's culpability for that as well. So in this case over here, person has an ability to pass halacha, person has an ability to get involved, person has the ability to take on responsibility and doesn't do so. Vatsum kol harogel, you close your eyes. There's also culpability and liability for not getting involved. Incredible Gemara. Vad kama. So we'll say, so how old? So we'll say, so now again we spoke of this idea. So now it turns out that katan shelo kalalo chadashav really refers to a person who enters into the world of pasking halacha too early. In other words, he's kicking his rebellion, right? So how old should a person be before they go ahead and they get involved in the pasking of halacha? To which the Gemara says, Arba Shanin, 40. 40 is the age. Se'ini v'ha Rabba. But what about Rabba? Rabba Ori. Rabba will say now, Rabba died, Rashi says, at 40. Rabba died at 40, which means that Rabba was obviously passing halacha much earlier, to which the Gemara says, B'shavyon. That was different. B'shavyon. Rashi says, Im shaval agadol ha'ir b'chachma. We'll say that was a different case. If a person is a Talmid Chacham, and they are equal in knowledge and greatness to the Rav of the city, and they're younger, ultimately then they can paskin halacha. So again, Rabba, he was younger, but Lamaisa, he was shaveh. He was equal in greatness to anyone else, and therefore he had the ability to go ahead and paskin halacha. We'll say incredible. So much to speak about over here, but we're going to have to go weiter. Makas Prushin. So we'll say, says the TORAH, Shiva Prushin. We'll say, there are 7 different types of Prushin. I will say, now in this context, a parush literally means someone who's separate. So I will say, I think a good word for this is like, we'll call it an ascetic. Right? A parush is someone who separates himself. So it's really someone who engages in a more ascetic type of behavior. So the Gemara says there are 7 type of prushin. 7 type of prushin. What are the 7 types of prushin? Here we go. Parush shichmi. Parush, we're going to explain all of them. Parush nikfi. Parush kiyazi. Parush meduchya. Parush machavasi be'asana. Parush mi'ava. Parush mi'ira. Fine. These are the 7 categories. So now let's analyze them. So there's the Gemara. Parush nikfi, what's that? Zahamankif esraglov. Take a look at Rashi, I will say. What's mankif? Did I skip? Sorry. Thank you. Parush shichmi, what's a parush shichmi? Za'osa masa shchem. This is a person who engages in shchem behavior. I will say, what does that mean? Look at Rashi. Masa shchem. Shemalu l'shem shamayim. Shemalu shalo l'shem shamayim. So we'll say, so Shchem. Remember again, Shchem, they did a bris milah. Why did they do a bris milah? Because Shchem wanted to marry Dinah. So in other words, they engaged in religious service, but for total ulterior motives. So we'll say, so what is a parush shchemi? So parush shchemi is someone who engages in ascetic, religious behavior, but only to gain covet from others. Right? So or I should say, or for that matter, for some benefit. So there's absolutely no true religious underpinnings to his behavior. The only thing he's doing is ultimately either to get benefits, right? To get some type of hana, or to get covered from people. Fine. Next, Parush Nakvi. What's a Parush Nakvi? Zahamankiv Esraglov. Rashi says over here, Maglis Makniv Esraglov, Mahalich B'Shiflus, Ekev B'Sad Gudel, Ve'inu Merim Raglov Min Ha'aretz, Mitoch Kach, Menakiv Etzba'osa Ba'avarim. So we'll say, so this is a person who goes ahead and shuffles his feet. He walks in small steps, shuffling his feet. When a person walks like this, it makes a lot of noise. Right? So it sounds like, again, a person like this is very humble, right? They're walking very slowly, right? Very, very small steps, dragging their feet. So again, it gives the appearance, ultimately, again, of piety. Next, Parush Kiazi. What's a Kiazi Parush? We'll say this is a person who's bleeding as a result of walking into walls. Now, what's that about? Look at Rashi. Mak is dam l'ksalim. O sa'atzno ke'otzim einov shalo yistakel b'noshim. Mitoch kach makarosha b'kosav adam yotzei. I would say he walks with his eyes closed. Now, why does he walk with his eyes closed? Because he doesn't want to see anything inappropriate, which sounds nice, except there's only one problem, which is you're walking with your eyes closed, right? So it's amazing what inevitably happens. He walks into walls. And he bleeds. But I will say, instead of saying, okay, it's not a good idea, instead he looks at the scars and the bleeding as like a badge of honor. So we'll say, it's false practice. We'll say, by the way, it's actually interesting. It's actually interesting because we'll say, a lot of times in life, we do things which inevitably cause us to walk into walls and bleed. Not literally, but figuratively. But the interesting part is, we still do them, right? I have behaviors that I know are a dead end. I have behaviors that I know do not work for me. I have behaviors that I know just cause pain. And yet, I still do them. Time after time after time after time. The Gemara that's called the Parush Kiazi. Right? The Parush Kiazi is this guy who thinks he's doing the right thing, he thinks he's a Parush, but Lamais, it's absolutely foolish behavior. Parush B'duchya. What's Parush B'duchya? Amra Rav Shila, Demeshapa Ki B'duchya. People say that ultimately, again, he's bent over, like a pestle. Right? So this is a guy who totally walks hunched over as a display of humility. Parush Machavasi V'asana. So we'll say, I just want to point out, these are all, again, these are not good. These are not good, right? Whereas in the eyes of Chazal, these were considered to be exaggerated behaviors that are not helpful. In other words, there is a way to be pious. And maybe there even is a place for a parush, right? It's not an ascetic lifestyle, it's not for everyone, but it may be for some, but even so, one has to be a parush with chachma. These are examples of precious without chachma. So the Gemara goes like the parush machavasi vesana. So this is an interesting one. A guy is a parush who says, tell me what my obligation is and I'll do it. And I both say, when you read this sounds great, right? This sounds great. The Gemara says, Hamal Yusihi. I will say, I don't know, shouldn't all of us be this kind of guy who says, tell me what my obligation is and I will do it. Tell me what my obligation is and I'll do it. To which the Gemara says, Ela da'amar machovasi su v'asena. No, we'll say, what is he saying? This is this. He's saying, tell me, what else is there for me to do? The else is the operative word. What else is there? We'll say, when a person says, what else is there for me to do? They'll say, what's the inference? What's the inference? What could be inferred from that statement? I've already done everything that is incumbent upon. I will say, it's like imagine a person says, tell me what else there is to learn. What? What else there is to learn? What other mitzvos are there to do? What other mitzvos? Right? We have a whole bunch of mitzvahs, we'll say, right? Whole bunch of Torahs. When a person goes out and says, right, ma'esod, right? What is it? Machovasi v'su esa, right? What else is there for me to do? I'll say that is a display of false piety. Parush me'ava, parush me'ira. Shabbos is very interesting. If a guy will say, parush me'ava, sounds like ultimately, again, he's a parush, he lives an ascetic life, right? Why? Me'ava, from avas Hashem. Parush Mira means he's Parush Mira. The Gemara says, Amrule Abai V'Rav Alatana Lo Tisni Parush Me'ava Parush Mira. Take these off the list. I will say these actually don't belong over here. Look at Rashi. Rashi says Parush Me'ava Me'avas Schar HaMitzvus V'lo li'avas mitzvos habore. Miyira sha'onshin. Rabbi say, just so you understand, the ava over here in Yira is ava of reward, love of reward, and Yira is fear of punishment. So a guy says, I'm going to be a parush because I want reward. Or a guy says, I'm going to be a parush, why? Because I want to avoid punishment. So Rabbi says, Sabai and Rabbi say, take these off the list. Now, why do you take these off the list? Rabbi says, it's incredible. In reality, you should do mitzvahs even shalol lishma. Even not for the right purposes. Why? Shemitok shalol lishma, ba lishma. Because Rabbi say, if you start, first of all, if you wait to do things for the right reasons, you're going to end up doing nothing. So better to start things for the wrong reasons and do them. Because if you do things, if you get used to doing things, even for the wrong reasons, ultimately, you'll come to do them for the right reasons. So therefore, I will say, if a person is a parush me'ava, or a parush mi'ira, in other words, that he says, I'm going to serve Hashem because I want reward, or I'm going to serve Hashem because I want to avoid punishment. Not ideal, but a fantastically amazing start. I will say again, the worst thing you could be in Yiddishkeit is a purist. It's the worst thing you could be in. The worst thing you could be in life is a purist, because people who are purists get absolutely nothing done. Instead, again, go for good. Go for good. Start with good, and if you start with good, you can work your way up to excellent. Start with excellent, and you get started with absolutely nothing. That's the shalol lishma, ba lishma. Just start doing, even if your intentions are flawed, because if you start doing, you'll get yourself to the right intentions. Incredible. So the Gemara goes like, Dimitamra mitamra udimegalia Beidina Rabba Lispara Mehani Dechafu Gundi. Shabbos said this is an incredible statement. Shabbos said, look how this sugya kind of ends. The truth is, the one thing you can never really tell in life is who is genuine. Right? You can't really tell who's genuine. So his lashon over here is, right, the hidden ones will be hidden, the revealed ones will be revealed. Some people you could see are fake. Other people do a great job, right? And they fool the entire world. But here's the good news. Beit Din Rabbah. Ultimately, again, the Beis Din of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lispera Mehani Dechafe Gundi, will go ahead and take and literally exact punishment from those who wrap themselves in a cloak of tzitzis. In other words, both say the cloak of tzitzis ultimately represents one who puts on an external display of piety, putting on a good show. So essentially, again, can you fool people? Sure. You could always fool people. You could do a very good job at fooling people. But at the end of the day, the good part is, even if you could pull the wool over the eyes of man, at the end of the day, you can never fool HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Yehoshua exacts punishment ultimately again from those who live lives of disingenuousness. Disingenuousness. I will say, because at the end of the day, I will have to stop over here. I will say, but at the end of the day, Lemaisa, at the end of the day, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu ask of us? Not perfection. He just asks us to be real. Or he just asks us to be genuine people. And therefore, again, Allah Lemaisa, a person puts on a facade, a person puts on a show for that. Right? It's actually for sin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rachmanis. For disingenuousness, that the Yehoshua has very little patience. We'll say, we're not finished. Yanai Malka tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chavra Zoom, have a great day, everyone. Maishi, I'm not sure. The problem is, it's right in my range. No, I don't know. I'm gonna give it one more day. Let me see. Maybe I'll get used to it because I can sit more comfortably, which is good. The problem is that literally it just blocks me. Let's see. Thank you.